Hey everyone, I'm Nigel and welcome to my channel. Today we're setting up a VPC and deploying a Linux Ubuntu server with Apache, MySQL and PHP on an AWS EC2 instance. I just did this for the first time and I'm excited to share how I went about it. Now here's the deal. I'm new to cloud computing, so I'm using just one public EC2 instance for both our web server and database. I know this isn't the ideal setup, but if you're a beginner like me, this keeps things simple for us. This setup is also fine for a small blog or a small business website. And with that said, let's get started. Okay, so I've already logged into my AWS console dashboard. And from there, I'm going to go to services at the top left corner, scroll down to networking and content delivery, click on that, then scroll down to VPC and click on that. And we're going to create a virtual private cloud or VPC on the VPC page. Once we get to the VPC page, click the Create VPC button. And this will take us to the VPC creation page. And on the VPC settings, you want to select VPC and more. By default, it will be on VPC only, but we don't want to create just the VPC. We want to create the VPC and the networking that we'll need with our VPC to connect it to the internet. So we're going to need the VPC and this extra stuff, the subnets, the root table, and the network connection. So select VPC and more. Then let's give the project a name. Learning VPC web server. That's what I'll call it. And then IPv4 CIDR block. This is the range of IPs that your VPC will have. We'll leave it as the default 10.0.0.0/16. We're going to ignore the IPv6 CIDR block, ignore tenancy. Then under number of availability zones, we're going to bring it down from 2. Right now we have US East 2A and US East 2B. We're going to bring it down to 1. And we'll be left with 2A only. And then number of public subnets, we'll leave it as 1. Number of private subnets, we'll bring that down to 0. And if we check our subnets, now we only have 1 public subnet. And then let's scroll down again. And we'll leave the NAT gateways as none, and we'll bring the VPC endpoints down to none, and that will reduce the network connections to 1 here also. There were 2 before that. And after that, we're done. We can now create the VPC. So click Create VPC. And AWS will set everything up on your VPC, and you can click the View VPC button. There isn't much here to see. It's got all the settings we mentioned earlier, and we can check it out in the breadcrumbs under your VPCs, and it will be there. You'll also have the Learning VPC web server VPC, and you'll also have the default VPC and other VPCs that you might have already created before. Next, let's create an EC2 instance. So go to Services, Compute, and scroll down to EC2. Sorry, it's near the top, so there wasn't scrolling needed. Click on EC2. And EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. It's essentially a virtual machine on the web or on the internet. So once we get to the EC2 page, let's click Launch Instance. And we'll get the setup page for creating your instance. So we're going to call our instance my first web server, and let's give that an operating system since it's a virtual computer on the web. I'm used to Ubuntu, so that's what I'll use, and that's what you'll need to use to follow along too. And I'm going to select Ubuntu Server 22.04, and that's free tier eligible. So this is the Amazon machine image. Next, we'll scroll down to the instance type. You can leave the architecture as the default, then come to the instance type, T2 micro, free tier eligible. So the instance type is basically the hardware and the costing that comes with your instance. So we've got 1 CPU, 1 GB memory, and it's got the latest generation of processors, I think. And then on the cost, we'll get, that's the pricing there. For Linux, it will be 1 cent and some change per hour. Next, we'll come down to the key pair login. This will be your login credentials to log into the site. So we can create a new pair, click create new key pair, and let's call it my, okay, let's separate the words with dashes. Server key, and leave the key pair type as RSA, and I'm going to select .ppk for the private key format because I'm using PuTTY, which is an application to connect to servers via SSH. So I need the PPK format to connect with PuTTY. And create key pair, and when I click that, it will automatically download the private key here. And after the private key is downloaded, let's come down to network settings, and by default it selects the default VPC, but we created another one, so let's click edit and select our custom VPC, which is this one, the Learning VPC web server, and it will automatically set the subnet and gateway and route table that we selected earlier. So we've got the subnet, let's click enable on auto assign public IP. Then under firewall security groups, we're going to click create security group and name it my VPC SG for security group. and we can leave the description as the default. It's not really a big deal. Then under inbound security group inbound security group rules SSH, we're gonna set the source type to my IP, and that will limit SSH connections to only my IP address, because I want the SSH to be strictly used only by me and no other users. Then we can add security group rules for HTTP. So on type, let's scroll down and select HTTP, and that can be connected from anywhere, and add a security group rule for HTTPS too. So let's add a security group for HTTPS and source type anyway, so visitors can view your website using HTTP or HTTPS, and it will also give the ports and protocols and CIDR blocks and the rest of that automatically. Then let's scroll down to configure the storage, and we just need 8 gigabytes. Is more than enough for the purpose that we're using it today. And scroll down and we'll get a summary of the instance details. Just one instance with canonical Ubuntu 22.04 LTS on a T2 micro server type with a security group and one 8 gigabyte volume. So we can go ahead and click launch instance. And AWS will start setting up the instance. And it says success, but if we come to instances, it might still be setting up. So you can see here it says pending. So we'll give it a couple of seconds more to set up. And while we wait, what else are we going to do? So we're going to connect to the instance and then install Apache 2 and MySQL on the instance. And in a future video, we're going to set up WordPress on the same instance. So I'm going to show how to set up WordPress. Because basically, once the Apache 2 is set up, you can actually set up static websites on the site. But that also wouldn't be an ideal setup, since there's serverless setups which you can make with AWS. Oh, well, this is taking a while. It's still pending. Maybe let's try refreshing the page. And it should be done once the page refreshes. Okay, and there we go. The server is running now. So we can select the instance, my first web server, then click on connect. And this will take you to the connection settings. So if you want to connect it via SSH, first I'm going to come here to EC2 instance connect, copy the IP address. So you can click on the copy icon to copy this IP address, and take note of the username. It's Ubuntu. Then if you're using SSH on anything other than Windows, you can follow these instructions. But if you're using SSH on Windows, you're going to need an application called PuTTY. So I'm going to press start and type in PuTTY. And and I've already installed this. You'll need to install PuTTY. You can look online for the instructions on how to set up PuTTY. So I'll open PuTTY. Once PuTTY is opened, I'll paste in the IP address under session and host name. That's the IP address for our server. Then I'll come down to connection, click the plus next to SSH, then click the plus next to auth, and click on credentials. And then click browse under private key file for authentication. And the server we are using, the server key, the private key we're using is this one, my server key. So click open, and then we can click open at the bottom of the application page. Then you'll get a warning. The host key is not cached for the server. You have no guarantee that the server is the computer you think it is. While we have no guarantee, we know that it is the key, that it is the server that we created, so the key is safe. So we can just go ahead and click accept, and it will ask you to log in as and type in the username we saw earlier, Ubuntu, and it will use the key file as the password. The key file has the password, so that's what it will use. And then we logged into our server now. So we're on the remote computer through PuTTY. Next, I've lined up the instructions for installing Apache and MySQL. So to install Apache, first let's type sudo apt update. So I'll just copy this text since I've typed it already. Sudo apt update, come back to PuTTY or the command line shell, and I'll right click to paste it in and press enter. And this will update the Ubuntu package manager, or basically update the information that Ubuntu has about the latest software available, so that when we install Apache and MySQL, we'll install the latest versions. So now that we've updated the apt or aptitude package manager, we can sudo apt install Apache 2. This will install the Apache 2 package. So let's come back to the command shell and paste in that command, sudo apt install Apache 2. Press enter, and it tells you after this operation 8,518 kilobytes of additional disk space will be used. Do you want to continue? Yes. So press Y, press enter, and it will take a couple of seconds to a minute to install Apache 2. It's done installing Apache 2, and we can also next start Apache 2. So sudo systemctl start Apache 2. And press enter, paste that in and press enter. So Apache 2 is started Next, let's make sure Apache 2 is enabled. So I'm going to copy that, sudo systemctl enable Apache 2. This will make sure that Apache 2 automatically starts whenever the server also starts up. So I'm going to paste that in. Okay, done. So now Apache 2 is running. We can check by copying the IP address again, then come to your browser, open a new tab, paste in the IP address, and it should load the default Apache 2 page. And there it is. The server's working. We can experiment a bit, and let's come to the command line. Sudo nano, and let's edit the default page that we see here, which is in the var/www/html index.html file. Press enter and it will open a text editor, the nano text editor, and we can make a small change to the file. So I'm scrolling down until we get the HTML, and we want to change the text here. I'm just going to add hello world at the end. Then press Ctrl X to exit, and then save. I'll press Y for yes and enter to save. And then if we come back to the browser and refresh, there's our hello world. Okay, that's done. Now let's set up the MySQL server. So here's the instructions to install MySQL. So sudo apt install MySQL server. I'll copy that, paste it in here. Okay, I copied some extra stuff by mistake, but no worries. We can take that off and press enter. Do you want to continue? Press Y for yes. And while it's installing, let's go and copy the next command, and that's sudo systemctl start MySQL to start the MySQL database server. Oops, I pressed Control Save instead of Control C. Control C to copy. Let's come back here. It's still installing. It should be done in a couple of seconds. And we can start the MySQL server. And next, let's secure the MySQL server. So sudo systemctl MySQL _secure _installation. Copy that, come back to the command line, paste it in, and we'll go through some steps to secure your server. And the first step, it says Validate password component can be used to test passwords and improve security. It checks the strength of password and allows the users to set up only those passwords which are secure enough. Would you like to set up the validate password component? And we're going to press Y for yes, because we need the database to be secure as possible since it's on a public VPC. And I'm going to select level 2 for strong. And do I want to remove anonymous users? Yes. I do not want anonymous users connecting to my databases and disallow root login remotely. Yes, I only want logins through the server, not remotely. Type Y for yes and press enter. And remove test database and access to it. I'll press Y for yes, press enter, and reload the privilege tables now. And I'm going to press Y for yes and press enter. And all done. We've secured the database. We've installed Apache and MySQL. And in the next video, I'll show how to install WordPress on the server. So thanks for watching, and I hope you find this helpful.